In the spring of 2021, a 31-year-old hiker named Kodiak Tanner set out on a solo trip into Zion National Park. He was experienced. He had gear. He had a plan. He told friends he would be back in 3 days. He was found 11 days later, dead at the bottom of a canyon slot, less than 2 miles from a paved road. The cause of death was not a fall. It was not an animal attack. It was dehydration and hyperthermia. The slow, quiet collapse of a human body in a place that looked, from every photograph ever taken of it, like paradise. This national park is loved by millions of visitors every year. But what most people don't know is the dark truth hidden beneath its beauty. Stay until the end to discover the shocking reality. There is a version of Zion National Park that exists on Instagram. It is all amber light and cathedral walls. It is the Virgin River running cold and clear between sandstone cliffs that glow like embers at sunset. It is families laughing on suspension bridges. It is couples holding hands at Angel's Landing. It is the kind of place that makes people feel, for a moment, that the world is fundamentally good and endlessly beautiful. That version is real, but it is incomplete. Because Zion National Park is also one of the most statistically dangerous national parks in the United States. It receives more search and rescue operations per square mile than almost any comparable protected wilderness area in the country. Its terrain is deceptive in ways that have killed trained hikers, experienced climbers, and cautious tourists alike. And the very features that make it breathtaking, the narrow canyons, the towering walls, the hidden water, the extreme elevation changes, are the same features that have ended lives with almost mechanical regularity. To understand why, you have to understand what Zion actually is. Not the postcard, the place. Zion National Park sits in the southwestern corner of Utah, in a region geologists call the Colorado Plateau. It covers approximately 229 square miles. That sounds manageable. It is not. Because those 229 square miles contain some of the most complex, layered, and unforgiving terrain on the North American continent. The park's defining feature is Zion Canyon itself, a 15-mile gorge carved over millions of years by the Virgin River cutting through Navajo sandstone. The walls of that canyon rise, in places, to nearly 2,500 feet. That is roughly the height of 8 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other, and you are standing at the bottom. The rock itself is ancient. The Navajo sandstone that forms Zion's iconic walls was deposited during the Jurassic period, roughly 180 million years ago, when this region was a vast desert of wind-blown sand dunes. Over time, those dunes were buried, compressed, and cemented into stone. The result is a rock formation that is simultaneously beautiful and treacherous, smooth in places, crumbling in others, and almost entirely unpredictable under the weight of a human body. The elevation within the park ranges from approximately 3,666 feet at the canyon floor to 8,726 feet at Horse Ranch Mountain. That is a difference of more than 5,000 feet within a single park boundary. And that elevation change is not gradual. It is sudden, steep, and relentless. The climate follows the terrain. At the canyon floor, summer temperatures regularly exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. At the higher elevations, winter brings snow, ice, and temperatures that drop well below freezing. In a single day, a hiker moving from the canyon bottom to the mesa top can experience a temperature swing of 40 degrees or more. The park exists in multiple climatic zones simultaneously, and most visitors arrive dressed for only one of them. The history of human presence in Zion stretches back at least 8,000 years. The earliest inhabitants were hunter-gatherers who understood this landscape with an intimacy that modern visitors cannot replicate in a weekend trip. The ancestral Puebloans, the Paiute people, these were cultures that spent generations learning how this land behaved, where the water was, where the flash floods came from, which rock faces were stable and which were not. When Mormon pioneers arrived in the mid-1800s, they named the canyon Zion, a Hebrew word meaning a place of refuge, a sanctuary. It was a name born from spiritual awe. But the pioneers who settled here also understood, in ways that modern tourists often do not, that this landscape demanded respect. They built their communities carefully. They watched the sky. They knew what the canyon could do. The park was officially established in 1919, making it Utah's first national park. In the century since, it has been transformed by infrastructure, paved roads, shuttle buses, maintained trails, visitor centers, and the kind of signage that makes wilderness feel navigable. And that transformation, paradoxically, may be one of the most dangerous things that ever happened to it. Here's a fact that most people do not consider when they arrive at Zion. The infrastructure of a national park is not designed to make the wilderness safe. It is designed to make the wilderness accessible. Those are not the same thing. A paved road into a canyon does not change the canyon. A maintained trail up a cliff face does not change the cliff. A shuttle bus that drops you at a trailhead does not change what lies beyond the trailhead. What the infrastructure does, what it cannot help but do, is create a psychological impression of safety that the landscape itself does not support. Researchers who study risk perception have a term for this: the safety paradox. The more protected an environment appears, the more risks people are willing to take within it. And Zion, with its manicured trails and its cheerful visitor center and its gift shop selling refrigerator magnets, appears very protected indeed. The result is a steady, predictable stream of people who arrive at one of the most extreme environments in North America wearing sandals. This is not an exaggeration. Park rangers at Zion have documented, repeatedly and consistently, that a significant portion of visitors who require search and rescue operations were wearing inappropriate footwear. Not hiking boots, not trail runners, sandals, flip-flops, in some cases bare feet. But footwear is only the beginning of the problem. Because the deeper issue is not what people are wearing, it is what people are thinking. There is a trail at Zion called the Narrows. It is, by most measures, one of the most spectacular hikes in the United States. The trail follows the Virgin River through a slot canyon so narrow that in places the walls are only 20 feet apart and the sky above is reduced to a thin ribbon of blue. The walls rise hundreds of feet on either side. The water runs cold and clear over smooth river stones. It is, genuinely, one of the most beautiful places on Earth. It is also a place where people die. The Narrows is not a conventional trail. There is no trail. You are walking in a river. The riverbed is uneven, slippery, and constantly changing. The water depth varies from ankle-deep to chest-deep depending on the season, the weather, and conditions upstream that you cannot see from where you are standing. And that last part, conditions upstream that you cannot see, is the critical detail that has killed people in the Narrows. Flash floods in slot canyons are among the most violent and least predictable natural phenomena in North America. They do not require rain at your location. They require rain anywhere in the watershed upstream of you. A thunderstorm 20 miles away, over mountains you cannot see, can send a wall of water down a slot canyon with almost no warning. The water does not trickle in. It arrives. It arrives as a surge of brown, debris-filled water, moving at speeds that can exceed 30 miles per hour, carrying boulders, logs, and anything else that was in its path. In a slot canyon, There is nowhere to go. The walls are vertical. The canyon is narrow. The water fills the space completely. In August 2015, 7 hikers were killed in a flash flood in Keyhole Canyon, a slot canyon within Zion National Park. This is one of the deadliest single incidents in the park's history. The hikers were experienced. They had checked the weather forecast. The forecast had not predicted rain at their location, but a storm system moved through the region, and water from that storm funneled into the canyon faster than any warning system could track. The National Weather Service had issued a flash flood watch for the region that day. Not a warning, a watch. Which means conditions were favorable for flash flooding, but flooding was not considered imminent or certain. The distinction between a watch and a warning is one that most people, including experienced outdoors people, do not fully understand. A watch means be prepared. A warning means it is happening. In a slot canyon, by the time a warning is issued, it is often already too late. 7 people died. They were found in the canyon after the water receded. The investigation confirmed that the flood had been triggered by a storm cell that produced intense rainfall over a relatively small area upstream. There was no individual failure of judgment that caused this. There was a gap between the information available and the information needed, and 7 people fell into that gap. But flash floods are only one of the ways Zion kills, and in some ways they are the most honest. They are sudden, dramatic, and clearly the result of an external force. The more insidious dangers are the ones that develop slowly, invisibly, inside the body of the person experiencing them. Heat illness is the leading cause of medical emergencies in Zion National Park. Not falls, not floods. Heat. The human body is remarkably good at regulating its own temperature, up to a point. When that point is exceeded, the consequences escalate rapidly. Heat exhaustion, the early stage, produces symptoms that are easy to dismiss. Fatigue, headache, nausea, dizziness. These are also the symptoms of a long hike on a hot day, which is why people dismiss them. They tell themselves they are just tired. They tell themselves they just need to push through to the next viewpoint. They tell themselves they will drink more water when they get back to the car. Heat stroke, the advanced stage, is a medical emergency. The body's core temperature rises above 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The brain begins to malfunction. Confusion sets in. Coordination fails. The person may not recognize that anything is wrong. They may become combative or disoriented. Without immediate cooling and medical intervention, heat stroke can cause permanent organ damage or death within hours. The transition from heat exhaustion to heat stroke can happen in less than 30 minutes in extreme conditions. And the conditions in Zion Canyon in July and August are extreme. The canyon walls absorb heat during the day and radiate it back at night. The canyon floor can be significantly hotter than the surrounding landscape. There is often little shade on the most popular trails, and the most popular trails, Angel's Landing, the Narrows, Emerald Pools, are the ones that attract the most inexperienced hikers. In 2019, a 13-year-old boy died of heat stroke on the West Rim Trail in Zion. He had been hiking with his family. The family had water. They had started early. But the temperature that day reached extreme levels, and the boy's body could not compensate. He collapsed on the trail. By the time emergency services reached him, he could not be saved. His name was Caden Moran. He was from Nevada. He had been to Zion before. The West Rim Trail, where Caden Moran died, is one of Zion's backcountry routes. It is not the kind of trail that appears on the first page of a Zion travel guide. It is not the shuttle stop with the gift shop. It is the other Zion, the one that exists beyond the canyon floor, up on the mesa, in the exposed high desert where the infrastructure ends and the wilderness begins without ceremony. Most visitors to Zion never see this part of the park. They come for the canyon. They ride the shuttle. They hike to Angel's Landing or walk the riverside walk. They see the walls and the river and the light, and they leave with photographs that will make their friends want to come too. This is the Zion that the park's 4.5 million annual visitors experience. But Zion is not just a canyon. It is a complex, multi-layered wilderness that extends far beyond what most visitors ever encounter. And the people who venture into that wilderness, the backcountry hikers, the canyoneers, the climbers, enter a different category of risk entirely. Canyoneering, in particular, is an activity that Zion has made famous. The park contains hundreds of technical canyons, routes that require ropes, harnesses, rappelling equipment, and specialized knowledge to navigate. Some of these canyons are among the most technically demanding in the world. Others appear from the outside to be manageable for beginners. That appearance is dangerous. In October 2019, a 19-year-old named John Griffith died while canyoneering in Heaps Canyon, one of Zion's most technical routes. Griffith was part of a group. The group had some experience. But Heaps Canyon is not a beginner route. It involves multiple rappels, some of them into pools of water, some of them in confined spaces where a mistake cannot be corrected. The investigation into Griffith's death found that the group had encountered a section of the canyon that was more difficult than they had anticipated. The specific circumstances of his death were not fully disclosed in public records, but the broader pattern was familiar to Zion's search and rescue teams, a group with some experience, a canyon that exceeded their skill level, and a consequence that could not be undone. What makes canyoneering in Zion particularly dangerous is the combination of technical difficulty and environmental unpredictability. A canyon that is manageable in dry conditions can become lethal when water levels rise. A rappel that is straightforward in warm weather can become impossible when the rock is wet and cold. And the canyons themselves, carved by water over millions of years, are designed, in a geological sense, to funnel water. When it rains, they fill. When they fill, they become traps. The park requires permits for many technical canyons, and those permits come with weather advisories. But a permit is not a guarantee of safety. It is a piece of paper. The canyon does not read it. There is a question that emerges from these cases, and it is not a comfortable one. Why do people keep dying in the same ways, in the same places, year after year? The answer is not stupidity. The people who die in Zion are not, as a rule, reckless or foolish. They are ordinary people, families, young adults, experienced hikers, who made decisions that seemed reasonable at the time and turned out to be catastrophic. The gap between those two things, reasonable and catastrophic, is where Zion does its most dangerous work. Part of the answer lies in what psychologists call optimism bias, the tendency to believe that bad things are more likely to happen to other people than to yourself. It is a nearly universal human trait, and it is particularly powerful in beautiful places. When you are standing in a canyon that looks like a painting, surrounded by other tourists who are also fine, the idea that you might be in danger feels abstract. It feels like something that happens in news stories. Not to you, not today, not here. But Zion does not care about your optimism. It does not adjust its temperature because you are having a good day. It does not postpone its flash floods because you did not bring a rain jacket. It does not make its rock faces more stable because you are a careful person who reads the trail signs. The park is indifferent. And indifference, in a landscape this extreme, is a form of danger. Angel's Landing is perhaps the most famous hike in Zion, and possibly in the entire American Southwest. It is a 5.4-mile round trip that gains 1,488 feet of elevation and ends on a narrow sandstone fin with sheer drop-offs on both sides. The final half-mile involves chains bolted into the rock to help hikers navigate sections where the trail is less than 3 feet wide and the drop on either side is measured in hundreds of feet. It is extraordinarily beautiful. It is also extraordinarily dangerous. Between 2004 and 2021, at least 6 people died on Angel's Landing. The actual number may be higher. The National Park Service does not always publicize individual incidents, and some deaths are classified under broader categories in their annual reports. But 6 confirmed deaths over 17 years on a single trail in a park that also has hundreds of other trails is a significant concentration of fatality. The deaths on Angel's Landing share a pattern. Most occur on the final section, the chains section, where the exposure is greatest. Most involve falls. Some involve hikers who turned back and fell on the descent, which is statistically more dangerous than the ascent, because tired legs and the psychological relief of having reached the summit can reduce concentration at exactly the moment when concentration is most needed. In 2021, the National Park Service implemented a permit system for Angel's Landing, limiting the number of hikers who can access the chain section on any given day. The permit system was introduced partly in response to overcrowding. The trail had become so popular that hikers were sometimes waiting in lines on sections of trail where there was no room to pass safely. But it was also, implicitly, an acknowledgement that the trail's danger was being amplified by the sheer number of people on it. The permit system reduced crowding. It did not eliminate deaths. In November 2021, a 13-year-old boy fell to his death on Angel's Landing. He was hiking with his family. They had a permit. The conditions that day were described as clear. The investigation found no evidence of equipment failure or trail malfunction. He fell. The details beyond that are not fully public. The family has not spoken extensively to media. What is known is what the park's records show. A child, a clear day, a fall, a death. What that case reveals, and what every death on Angel's Landing reveals, is that the trail's danger is not a function of weather or equipment or experience alone. It is a function of exposure. When you are on a 3-foot wide ridge with a 1,000-foot drop on either side, the margin for error is essentially zero. A stumble that would be embarrassing on a flat trail is fatal on Angel's Landing. A moment of distraction that would cost you nothing in a parking lot costs you everything on that ridge. The chains help. They are not a safety system. They are an aid. They give you something to hold. They do not prevent you from falling if you lose your footing, lose your grip, or are struck by another hiker losing their balance. They are a tool, and like all tools, they are only as effective as the person using them. The question of who is responsible for deaths in national parks is one that the American legal system has wrestled with for decades. The National Park Service operates under a doctrine of sovereign immunity that limits its liability for injuries and deaths that occur within park boundaries. Visitors are generally considered to have assumed the risk of the activities they undertake. The park posts warning signs. The park provides information. Beyond that, the legal framework largely places responsibility on the individual. This framework is not without logic. A national park cannot be made safe in the way that a theme park can be made safe. The wilderness cannot be padded and railed and monitored at every point. The scale is too large, the terrain too complex, the variables too numerous. If the National Park Service were held liable for every death that occurred in its parks, the parks would either be closed or so heavily restricted as to be unrecognizable. But the framework also creates a situation where the gap between what visitors expect and what the park actually is can grow very wide, without any institutional pressure to close it. The park can be beautiful and accessible and well-marketed and simultaneously lethal, and as long as the warning signs are posted, the legal obligation is largely met. The warning signs at Zion are, in fact, extensive. There are signs at trailheads. There are pamphlets at the visitor center. There are ranger talks. There is a website with detailed safety information. The information is available. The question is whether information, by itself, is sufficient to change behavior in a landscape that is actively working against the human brain's ability to accurately assess risk. The evidence suggests it is not. In 2017, researchers studying visitor behavior in national parks published findings that are relevant here. They found that visitors who received safety information before entering a park were not significantly less likely to engage in risky behavior than visitors who did not receive that information. The information changed what people knew. It did not reliably change what people did. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is a feature of human psychology. We process information differently when we are in an emotionally engaging environment. When you are standing at the base of a 2,000-foot sandstone wall in golden afternoon light, the part of your brain that processes beauty and wonder is very active. The part that processes risk assessment is somewhat less so. This is not a metaphor. It is a neurological reality. The implication for Zion is significant. The park's beauty is not just aesthetically powerful. It is cognitively disruptive. It actively interferes with the kind of clear-eyed risk assessment that the park's terrain demands. And the more beautiful the specific location, the more pronounced this effect tends to be. Angel's Landing is beautiful. The Narrows is beautiful. The slot canyons are beautiful. These are also the places where people die. There is another category of danger in Zion that receives less attention than falls and floods and heat, but that accounts for a significant portion of the park's search and rescue operations: getting lost. Zion has over 90 miles of maintained trails. It also has hundreds of miles of unmaintained routes, canyon systems, and cross-country terrain that is not marked, not mapped in detail, and not monitored. The boundary between maintained trail and unmaintained wilderness is not always obvious. In some parts of the park, a maintained trail simply ends, and the terrain continues in every direction with no clear indication of which way leads back to civilization. GPS technology has changed the calculus of getting lost in wilderness areas, but not in the way most people assume. GPS tells you where you are. It does not tell you how to get from where you are to where you need to be through terrain that may be impassable. It does not tell you that the route your phone is suggesting crosses a cliff face that cannot be descended without equipment you do not have. It does not tell you that the canyon you are about to enter has no exit. In 2016, a hiker named Amber Tucciaroni went missing in Zion after becoming separated from her group near the Kolob Canyon section of the park. She was found alive after a multi-day search, but the search involved dozens of personnel and covered a significant area of backcountry terrain. Her case was resolved well. Many are not. The Kolob Canyon section of Zion, the northwestern portion of the park, is less visited than the main canyon, but no less dangerous. In some ways, it is more dangerous, because its lower visitor volume means that a person in distress is less likely to encounter another hiker who can help or summon assistance. Cell phone coverage in Zion is inconsistent at best and non-existent in many backcountry areas. This is a fact that visitors frequently discover at the worst possible moment. The canyon walls that make Zion so visually dramatic also block radio signals. In the depths of a slot canyon, a cell phone is essentially useless. In the backcountry, coverage depends entirely on line of sight to a tower, which the terrain frequently prevents. The false security of a cell phone in wilderness is a documented contributor to search and rescue incidents across the American West. People venture further than they should because they believe they can call for help if something goes wrong. When something goes wrong and they cannot call, the situation that was already serious becomes critical. Zion's search and rescue team, staffed primarily by park rangers with specialized training, responds to hundreds of incidents per year. The exact number varies by year and by how incidents are classified, but the park consistently ranks among the busiest search and rescue operations in the national park system. In 2019, Zion conducted over 200 search and rescue operations. In some years, the number has been higher. Each of those operations represents a person or a group in a situation they could not resolve on their own. Some of those situations were the result of genuine accidents, a twisted ankle, an unexpected medical event, a sudden change in weather. Others were the result of decisions that, in retrospect, were clearly wrong. The challenge is that the decisions that look clearly wrong in retrospect often looked reasonable at the time. There is a specific type of incident that Zion's rangers have identified as particularly common and particularly preventable: the afternoon turnaround failure. Here is how it works. A hiker starts a trail in the morning. The morning is cool. The hiker feels good. The hiker reaches the halfway point of the trail and decides to continue rather than turn back because the destination is close and the hiker feels capable. The hiker reaches the destination. By this time, it is early afternoon. The temperature has risen significantly. The hiker has consumed most of their water. The return trip, which is the same distance as the outward trip, now has to be completed in hotter conditions, with less water, by a body that is already fatigued. This is the moment when heat illness begins. Not at the turnaround point. Not on the way out. On the way back, when the body is already compromised and the conditions are at their worst. The solution is simple. Turn around earlier than you think you need to. Experienced desert hikers turn back when they've used a third of their water, not half. Because the return trip is always harder, and the afternoon is always worse than the morning. It isn't complicated. It just requires turning back while you still feel capable of continuing, which is one of the hardest things to do in a beautiful place. The Virgin River, running through the heart of Zion Canyon, is underestimated for the same reason. In dry conditions, it's shallow and inviting. Children wade in it. Families picnic beside it. But it drains a watershed of roughly 3,800 square miles. Rain falling anywhere in that watershed, even miles away and out of sight, can turn the river from a trickle into a torrent within hours, with almost no warning at the canyon floor. That's what killed 7 people in Keyhole Canyon in 2015. The flood didn't come from the Virgin River itself, but from a tributary slot canyon that filled with water from a distant, localized storm. The park has since improved its flash flood warnings, but the geography hasn't changed. The watershed, the canyons, and the storms are all still there, and the time between a storm forming and water arriving can be measured in minutes. The 7 hikers who died had done everything right, checked the weather, secured permits, brought real experience. The investigation that followed concluded the conditions that day were genuinely unpredictable given the information available. That's an honest conclusion, and a terrifying one. It means doing everything right is not a guarantee of survival, and that in Zion, the margin between safety and catastrophe can be essentially zero. Rockfall is a quieter danger with the same lesson. Zion's sandstone walls aren't static. Water seeps into cracks, freezes, expands, and over time breaks sections free. The process is geological, but its consequences are instant. A 2019 rockfall near Court of the Patriarchs sent boulders weighing thousands of pounds into an area routinely full of visitors. No one died, but the message was clear. A canyon carved over millions of years is not a stable structure. It's one still being dismantled. Wilderness medicine has a term for the moment: a deteriorating situation tips beyond self-rescue. The point of no return. In Zion's heat, it can arrive fast. The body can lose over a liter of water per hour through sweat during vigorous exercise, and the recommended intake to match it is a liter an hour. Far more than most hikers carry. Just 2% dehydration impairs judgment, which is the cruelest part. It degrades the very faculties needed to recognize you're in trouble. In 2018, 26-year-old Kyle Burgess died in Zion's backcountry after becoming separated from his group and running out of water. He had water, a map, and hiking experience. What he didn't have was margin for error, and once the trail stopped matching his expectations, his resources weren't enough to fix it before his body hit its limit. His case isn't an outlier. It's representative of the dozens each year who arrive reasonably prepared and meet a park that's larger, hotter, and less forgiving than the visitor center suggests. Wildlife danger is also misunderstood. Mountain lion attacks are vanishingly rare. Rattlesnake bites happen but are rarely fatal with prompt treatment. The animal that injures the most people in Zion is the rock squirrel. Decades of habituation to human food have made them bold enough to bite, and they're the park's most common animal-related injury. It's a small symptom of a bigger problem. 4.5 million annual visitors straining a park built for far fewer. Visitation has more than doubled since 1990, driven largely by social media images of Angel's Landing and the Narrows. That growth has shifted who's coming. More first-timers, more international visitors, more people who aren't less careful, just less equipped in gear, knowledge, and conditioning. Meanwhile, the park's infrastructure hasn't kept pace. Shuttles run at capacity, parking fills early, and rangers spend more time managing crowds than teaching safety. The observation point trail shows the gap clearly. It's 8 strenuous, largely unshaded miles with 2,100 feet of gain, and it's marketed as a must-do without context. Rangers regularly meet hikers there with a single water bottle, cotton clothing, and no real sense of distance or time. The trail has seen repeated medical emergencies and at least one death, consistent with what rangers call a systemic gap between how the trail is photographed and what it actually demands. A photo of Angel's Landing shows the view from the top. It doesn't show the chains, the drop, the hiker whose legs were shaking, or the ranger who carried someone down on a stretcher. The invitation is real, but incomplete. And the incompleteness shows up in search and rescue logs, and some years, in deaths. There's a philosophical piece to this too. For most of human history, wilderness wasn't a destination. It was a condition people lived inside, with survival knowledge passed down through generations. The national park system offers something different. The relationship of a visitor who comes, looks, and leaves, treating wilderness as a backdrop to be photographed. That relationship isn't wrong, but it's incomplete. And in a place like Zion, the gap between understanding a place as beautiful and understanding it as dangerous is where the danger lives. During the 2020 pandemic, Zion reopened at reduced capacity, quieter than it had been in years. But search and rescue calls didn't drop proportionally. Park officials concluded the visitors who came were, on average, more adventurous, drawn into terrain the usual crowds had discouraged. It revealed something important. Crowds are dangerous in some ways, but they also provide passive safety. someone in distress is more likely to be seen. In the backcountry, that net disappears. A hiker who collapses on a remote trail may not be found for days. The backcountry permit system helps. Rangers know where you went and when you're due back. But it isn't a guarantee. In extreme heat, the window between serious heat illness and death can be hours. A search launched the morning after a missed return can be a recovery operation, not a rescue. Zion's search and rescue team is excellent. The limit isn't their skill, it's the math of terrain, time, and heat. Rangers describe a recurring, deeply human pattern. Hikers near Angel's Landing, who are clearly dehydrated and disoriented, but insist they're fine, wave off water and continue, already too impaired to accurately judge their own condition. Rangers can't legally compel a competent adult to accept help. Sometimes the hiker who refuses is fine. Sometimes they aren't, and the ranger who offered help has to live with that. Water is everywhere in Zion, and almost none of it is safe to drink untreated. The river carries sediment and runoff. Slot canyon pools can harbor giardia. A water filter or purification tablet solve this cheaply, but most visitors don't carry one, because a day hike doesn't feel like a survival situation. Sometimes it becomes one anyway, not dramatically, just a wrong turn and a water bottle that runs out an hour from the trailhead. Night changes everything. The canyon walls block ambient light entirely, headlamp batteries die, and the same heat that defines Zion's days gives way to genuine cold at elevation, a swing that catches hikers, especially wet ones from the Narrows, into hypothermia they never saw coming. The high Kolob Terrace, above the main canyon, is Zion's most remote and least supervised terrain. Hours from help, beyond cell coverage. The subway, a famous technical canyoneering route there, involves rappelling and swimming through cold, snowmelt-fed pools. Wetsuits are recommended. Not everyone wears one, and hypothermia is a documented risk for those who don't. Zion's worst incidents tend to stack multiple risk factors at once. Picture a hiker starting the Narrows on a clear morning with a slight afternoon storm chance, wearing a partial wetsuit, carrying 2 liters of water. By midday, they're deep in the canyon, legs numb, water nearly gone, unable to see the sky above the narrow walls. They don't know a storm has formed upstream. The water rises, turns brown, speeds up, and the canyon walls offer no ledge, no way up. This is the scenario that killed 7 people in Keyhole Canyon, unfolding in minutes, with no single obviously wrong decision, in a place that looked like paradise an hour earlier. The park rarely foregrounds its mortality record for visitors, and that silence widens the gap between perception and reality. Fully informing people wouldn't mean frightening them away. It would mean telling the story of Keyhole Canyon, of the 13-year-old who died of heat stroke on the West Rim Trail in 2019. Of the dozens carried out by rescue teams every year. Not warnings against visiting, invitations to see the park honestly. The people who know Zion best, rangers, technical guides, search and rescue specialists, don't see it as dangerous the way a broken machine is dangerous. They see it as powerful, operating by rules older than humanity that will outlast every visitor. The danger isn't a flaw in the park, it's a feature of it. A landscape that couldn't kill you wouldn't be wilderness. It would be a theme park. The same scale and power that make Zion worth visiting are inseparable from what make it dangerous. There's one more counterintuitive danger: success itself. Most hikers don't fall, don't meet a flash flood, don't get heat stroke, and that success becomes a feedback loop. The person who hiked in sandals and was fine tells friends sandals are fine. The person who skipped the flash flood forecast and was fine tells friends the forecast doesn't matter. Each story is true for the person telling it. and each is a potential death sentence for someone who follows it in slightly different conditions. The people who made the same mistakes and didn't survive aren't around to tell their version. Most of the millions who visit Zion this year will be fine. That's the most likely outcome, and the one the park's rangers and systems are built to produce. But some won't, and the difference often isn't experience or caution alone. Sometimes it's luck. Whether a storm cell forms over the watershed, whether a rock holds. But often enough to matter, it's the difference between someone who understood what they were walking into and someone who saw the park only as the photographs suggested it was. The canyon doesn't change for the visitor. The visitor has to change for the canyon. That means carrying more water than feels necessary, turning back earlier than you want to, understanding the difference between a flood watch and a warning, wearing shoes that grip wet rock, and telling someone where you're going. None of it is complicated or expensive. It just requires taking the park seriously, not as a backdrop for photographs, but as a place with its own rules, its own power, and its own indifference to human plans. Zion is one of the most extraordinary places on Earth, and it's worth the risk, but only if you see the risk clearly. The park rewards preparation and punishes assumption. It's generous to those who approach it honestly, and unforgiving to those who approach it with false confidence. The difference between a transcendent day and a catastrophic one can be as small as a water bottle, a weather check, or the decision to turn back while you still feel like you could go on. Zion has been here for 180 million years, and will be here long after everyone reading this is gone. It doesn't need your respect to survive. You may need it to survive Zion.